So one of two takeaways, right? First, black hits. If black hits, I'm like, boom, it's gonna be an amazing day. Let's get after it.
Yeah.
If black doesn't hit, I go, all my bad luck's out of the way. Let's get after it.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Cello. That was the answer to a Jeopardy question, and now you're supposed to say what the Jeopardy question is.
Would you even say cello?
Yeah.
Don't know.
What is Yo-Yo Ma famous for playing? Cello. How you be doing, man?
Wait, that was a hello joke.
Yeah, it's everything in life is a hello joke.
Killing me over here. Doogles, I got a question for you. What's the nicest restaurant you've ever been to?
Oh, I don't know. This week or in general?
In general.
I once ate at Minna, Michael Minna's restaurant. I don't think it's around anymore in San Francisco.
Ooh.
Michelin.
I like that. There was a Italian place back in San Francisco, not to get too deep in the weeds, that was like always rated as the world's top restaurant. One time I waited like 3 hours for that. It's worth it.
Wow.
Worth it. So when you go to these elaborate dining experiences, are you ever taken by the decor? Because lately I've been like just blown away by how much people invest in the whole experience. It's not just the food, it's everything.
I experience what I like to call the ambulance, right? Just how things feel in general. But I don't notice the decor, though. It's just like the feeling of the whole place.
If you're just throwing out numbers, like what do you think? How many millions of dollars do you think this Michelin star restaurant, your typical Michelin star restaurant, throws down to give you that ambiance?
1.2.
All right. Well, so there's a restaurant in Colorado near and dear to my heart that just spent $40 million on a renovation.
Oh, I know. Okay, I know. I know where you're going.
This is clearly Michelin star, don't you think?
Oh my goodness. I don't know.
$40 million.
It probably has more. It's more on the tire side of Michelin than the restaurant rating.
If folks don't know, because I know we have a worldwide audience, there's a restaurant in Denver, Colorado called Casa Bonita, which has become famous because of a South Park episode. If you've never been, you just got to go, guys. It's a truly unique experience.
Cliff divers.
I forget. They said it's like 56,000 square feet, which is insane because it's just in a strip mall. Like it doesn't look like it can hold us. There's 5 levels or something. There's caves,
outrageous.
Arcades. It's really outrageous.
I mean, I don't know what it's like now after $40 million, but I knew what it was like before.
What's so crazy is it was purchased. It went bankrupt during the pandemic, just to give a little background here. And then it was purchased by the South Park creators who happened to be Colorado natives. So they wanted to restore the thing. I think this article that came out of the New York Times by David Williams, the photographs by David Williams, it's by Matt Rochelle, breaks down how they thought they might spend 10 million, which is insane for a low-end restaurant like this, where the food is notoriously bad.
So bad.
This is
like no. Like so bad. I couldn't quite understand, but they had the whole shtick, right? The whole shtick. Like you go there for, again, the ambulance.
I mean, you weren't going for the food, right? The funny thing, when they talked about redoing the kitchen, they were like, they didn't have they basically had steamers. They like didn't have ovens in the kitchen. So that was part of the demo. Anyway, the guys came in with a budget of, I think, 10 million, which again, if you haven't been to this restaurant, you can't even understand how that could be your starting budget. They ended up spending north of $40 million on this renovation. It opens soon. I think we need to have a show there, Doogles. If not, we're just going to meet up because apparently they have edible food now.
You got to go. But does that make it worse though? Because part of the charm might have been the fact that you leave and you're like, that was so bad. And then you tell people about how bad it was.
Listen, I'm not going to complain about edible food. I'm not going for the food anyway, but like if it's edible, I'm pretty excited about this.
I'm not going to complain about
edible. Like the margaritas are actually drinkable too. This place could be amazing. guys, that's just a general shout out. If you're in Denver, find a way, because getting your head around how someone spent $40 million on a restaurant, you can't do it unless you absolutely step foot in the place. It's just not
Casa
possible.
Bonita.
There's
Casa
100,000 people on the wait list, Doogles, that want to go back.
Wow. Casa Bonita. Fun way to kick things off. Appreciate that. I'm going to reach into the fishbowl. I'm going to hit on something investing related. On Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin's little show, Squawk Box. He talked about an interview he had recently with Mark Rowan, who is the CEO of Apollo Management Group, the big investment firm. There are a couple things that he said, that Mark Rowan said, that I just want to touch on, get your view on, because it sounds like a bunch of nonsense to me.
Yeah, I think it might be. I just watched this morning, so I'm ready. I got hot takes coming your way.
The two things I want to touch on is, first, he says that we are in or about to go into, I can't remember which one it was, but a no recession is what he states. And his point is that even when we talk about, in our wildest dreams, the disaster that might happen around unemployment, we're talking about going to levels that are like 4.5%, which is typically a really solid employment rate. And to me, it's if I just took that on its own, I'd be like, oh, okay, sure. But when I listen to the whole thing, I just realized that he's kind of spitting out a bunch of hot garbage. And this, for me, so sorry, Mark Rowan, sorry, not sorry. Like, it just seems like he's throwing something out there to, I don't know if it's like appease the masses or sound smart or something like that, but it just doesn't seem like, obviously, if people think that 4.5% is like the worst case scenario, we've seen a lot worse. So like, why do you believe that that actually is the worst case scenario? I couldn't quite wrap my head around that.
I don't understand why he's making a prediction. Well, I guess maybe I do, because it's part of his job. He has to sound smart. He has to sound like what he knows what's happening in the future. But I think your point is more direct and much more reasonable. Like, we don't know. And every time we've thought we knew that banks weren't going to fail in 2023, or that we weren't going to have a pandemic in 2020, or that we weren't going to have a global financial crisis in the late aughts. Like, we don't know. It's garbage to think because then you fool yourself into making poor decisions.
So like I said, he said that, and I went, okay, sure, whatever. So then it continues. And he states that there's no alpha in the market. I'm going to give a high level view on alpha. Please, if you have a better definition, throw it in there. But you have two things that I'll mention here. One is alpha and one is beta. Beta is the performance of the market, effectively. And so if you think about beta, the beta of a stock is its correlation to the overall market performance. Alpha means, from a risk-adjusted basis, do you have an edge? Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the easiest way to think about it. So when there's alpha, it means that you can find maybe not quite arbitrage opportunities. It's not like free risk, but you can find opportunities that on a risk-adjusted basis are good bets. Anything else you want to add to that? Or is that a fair definition?
They're kind of garbage terms that are created so people can do math around volatility and outperformance in the market, but they get talked about a lot, and it's important to know the background, I think. But generally, when people are talking about beta, they're talking about matching the market's performance and the volatility associated with that. And when they're talking about alpha, they're talking about outperformance. Yeah, so I think you did a great job.
Yeah, it's a good point to throw volatility in there, because that is an important component. So he's saying there's no alpha in the market right now. Then, which I heard that and I went, okay. I mean, I got bones to pick. I'll tell you what bones I got to pick. But then he says, and there hasn't been for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I went, now we're brother real confused. I being the aforementioned brother. Then he takes that. So he took that pile of hot garbage, put more garbage on top of it. And then he says,
I jump in?
No, let me say this. Let me say this next thing. And then he says, and we know that there hasn't been alpha in the market for 20 years because this is something we've touched on a lot, because active portfolio managers have not been able to outperform for 20 years.
Because 80 to 90% of active funds underperform their indexes.
Yeah.
Well, that actually means there is alpha because there are people out there beating the market in public markets.
Yeah, but he's saying that there isn't alpha because active portfolio managers are not outperforming. And he's not saying that they're not outperforming because they're not good, right? Like,
or because some of
because they're
them
not
are managing,
incentivized.
like some people are actually managing to have lower volatility, which means they plan to underperform. Like
Yeah, that
there's
is
all
true.
sorts of other strategy. Now, I'm not saying that picking active stocks is easy, and I'm certainly not saying that outperforming the market is easy. But Douglas, you're hung up on this. I want to jump in. I saw the headline, I watched the video, and then I went, oh, this is absolute garbage. This is just his sales pitch. Do you know what he goes on to say? The only place to get alpha is in private markets,
Yes.
effectively through Apollo. So, like, come talk to me. Like,
yes, it was talking
throw
about
everything he says out. It's just a sales pitch. Absolute garbage. I don't know why. I do, because you got to fill airtime, but I don't know why we put people like this on the financial
no, and
news
the
endless.
way he states it, we'll put the video on the Substack so you can get a sense for how he says it. He says it in such a manner that it's like obvious. Like if he says it like, oh, like if anybody's looking at anything, you realize there's no alpha, and you realize there's no alpha because people haven't outperformed. I'm just like, hot garbage. My belief right now, independent of what happens in the market overall, this is a stock pickers market right now. I don't know if I'm not saying that stock pickers market will last for whatever, any particular period of time, but this is a point where the market moving, and we've talked about the concentration in the market, right? The market moving is not why you would outperform or not right now, because the market is made up of 7 stocks.
Yep. So I'm not, we are not saying that you should try and buy individual stocks.
No, you should not.
That's a poor idea for 19 out of 20 people, right? But I think we would agree in saying that the advice of just go buy an index fund when you're a US based investor is like very challenged right now for multiple reasons that we've talked about on the show over the course of years now. One, the US market is generally expensive. Two, 35% of its concentration is in the top 10 stocks. Mm-hmm. Some of those stocks are like Nvidia's, which are at insane multiples. And let me tell you a couple other stocks that are at insane multiples right now. Visa is at a price to sales of 15. MasterCard is at a price to sales of 15. Microsoft is at a price to sales of 12. Broadcom is at a price to sales of 10.
Hold on. Let's not pick on Broadcom.
Doogles is a Broadcom holder. Adobe is at a price to sales of 11. I could go on. So the point you're making as it relates to the CEO of Apollo is like, man, if there's ever a time to try and march to your own drum to zig when everyone else is zagging, like this might be a solid time to be like, hey, I'm not just buying the S&P 500. I'm adjusting my strategy slightly to get more value. That would be the definition of a stock pickers market in my eyes. Yeah. And I said this to you via text, but Mark, sorry, why did I buy Meta stock at $90 a share earlier, in less than 12 months ago when it's currently at 270? Because there's no alpha left in the public markets. That's one of the biggest stocks there is to trade. Like this talking point, I ended up laughing it off. It's just garbage.
I just want to. This is my own. I can't even call it naivete because I know better. But continued ignorant optimism is I turn some of these things on looking for like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Like this is going to be a hot take that I found to be contrarian. And instead, it's just like hot garbage. Somebody's trying to make, to your point, trying to make more management fees. And
okay, I have to, sorry to interrupt. I have to jump in. There are, I think 5, I bet you can come up with more people that if they're on CNBC, you should actually listen to. Howard Marks, 1. Warren Buffett, 2. Charlie Munger, 3. Seth Klarman, if he ever does it, but he doesn't really do those type of interviews. Morgan Housel, who doesn't do CNBC, but actually is a rational voice. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but basically everyone else is not worth the time to listen to, in my experience. You got any other names for me?
I'm trying to think of who was that guy who couldn't finish the interview because his audio was interrupted. You know,
because he was recommending to buy stocks that he didn't even know what the company did. That guy? No,
yes,
he's not
that
on that
was
list, Doogles.
another classic moment. Another classic moment. No, you're right. There are some folks, but oh man, disappointing. Just disappointing.
All right. Well, you're trying to get me upset and angry at poor financial advice today. And so the perfect train to continue that on is Dave Ramsey. I try not to talk to Dave Ramsey too much on the show because he gets me riled up. I do think some of the basic principles about pay off your debt are really solid personal financial advice that hopefully makes the world a better place. So I try not to throw shade. He has done a couple things recently that just I can't keep quiet anymore. He's kind of my Kathy Wood, Doogles, I think.
The thing is that I hear you not trying to throw shade, but
Yeah.
when I look over at the tree and you're just sitting under it, like I don't even need to throw the shade.
The shade, the clouds came over and rained on top of my parade. Okay. And I'm just going to talk about it now.
Exactly. I'm not throwing you under the bus. Why are you laying under the bus? And I'm just pointing at you.
3 weeks ago, I discovered, and my jaw is still on the floor from this, that Dave Ramsey on his website right now recommends buying mutual funds with a front end load. Okay, we have to jump in the time machine, go back, see Michael J. Fox, and we're in the 80s now. The people listening to the show don't even know what a front end load mutual fund is because this is literally 40 years old, where they used to charge additional fees to buy into a mutual fund. And you could either do that, you'd pay the fee up front. So not only does he recommend buying that, which means he's stealing your money. He's stealing money of the people that are using his website for financial advice. He also talks about expense ratios around 1%. So I can guarantee the people he's sending his radio audience to are paying a ridiculous amount of fees compared to like a Vanguard, a Fidelity, anywhere else. That gets me riled up. This week, he's in the news because he's facing a $150 million lawsuit for endorsing Timeshare X Team, which actually didn't get anyone out of their timeshares and collected ridiculous upfront fees. There's an example in here of someone that paid $72,000 upfront because they promised they could get them out of the timeshare. Guess what? They didn't get them out of the timeshare.
The name of the company is Timeshare Exit Team. Sorry, the name of the company was Timeshare Exit Team until they realized the only thing they didn't do was help people to exit timeshare. So they changed it to like something Goodwin and Associates or like something like that.
I mean, they've already paid a settlement over deceptive promises in the state of Washington, and they don't appear to have gotten anyone out of a timeshare. Again, the name of the company is Timeshare Exit Team. They were wholly endorsed by Dave Ramsey and on his show a ton. And he made a ton of money off them.
It was like $30 million or something like that.
$30 million. There's those 2 points. If you Google Dave Ramsey, you can find there's whole other stuff about the workplace and deceptive practices that I don't even want to discuss here. The last thing I want to mention today is this clip you just sent me of him losing his mind when someone calls into the show and tells them that their house actually has lost value since purchase in the last 2 years. How do you live in a world where you think that's not possible? Like, he honestly looks like losing money in real estate is not possible.
This person calls in, and says like, I bought a house and it was a year ago, right? I mean, these things are long-term investments, just things in general to be long-term investments, whatever you're talking about. They said, I bought a house about a year ago. It went down. And the look on the faces of Dave Ramsey, I'm not sure who the name of his co-host is. The look on their faces were like, what? What did you do wrong? Whatever could you have done wrong? Like, you must have done something wrong because, and they're like, no, I mean, I bought a house. That same house is now valued less. What could have potentially happened in the interim?
What has happened? Yeah, what has happened in the past 12 months? Oh, rates went from 0 to 5%. Like, that's the Fed fund rates. That's not even mortgage rates. Mortgage rates went from 3 to 7.5. Like, that changes the value of a property because the large majority of people finance their. Anyway.
Oh, by the way, quick shout out here. So this clip was tweeted out by Ramit Sethi. Have you watched his show recently? He wrote a book about 12, 13 years ago as
I
well.
consumed the podcast. I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a Netflix show that's called How to Get Rich, and it's a clickbaity type of title, same as his book, which is I Will Teach You How to Be Rich. But it's not about like get rich quick schemes by any means. What he does in this Netflix show is he goes and meets with couples who are like having financial troubles and helps them to do things like get out of debt, think about their spending, all that kind of stuff. So it's like baseline things. I'd recommend it. It's an enjoyable show for you. So just shout out to all you folks that have Netflix out there. How to Get Rich.
Yeah, one of the cool principles he has is spending a little more time focusing on how you spend money rather than just how you save money. Yep. Because so many people, and I'm sure we're guilty of this, Doogles, would like imply that, you have to put 15% aside for retirement and then 10% aside in your emergency fund. And it ends up being this nonstop chorus of do this when you save. But if you don't think about how to spend that in a way that like makes your life better, you might be missing half the equation. I really like that approach for him. There's certainly things I disagree with him on, but hey, I'll say it this way: he's not nearly as bad as Dave Ramsey. So there we go.
Yes, so there's that. He's got that going for him. I'm gonna reach into the fishbowl for something that I've never heard him say. A way to spend your money is to go to Vegas and play terrible odds blackjack. Reason I'm bringing up blackjack, and there were two different people sent this over, so blowing up on the internets. The Wall Street Journal had this piece about changing odds out in Las Vegas, and I didn't know this was a thing. I don't play. Well, here's what I'll say: when I play the roulettes and the blackjack, it's pure gambling, and it's just to see how the day is gonna go. That's it. I go up, I put the money on black, and I'm like, this is good. This dictates the rest of my day. And you know what? It's never good. It's never good. And that never really works out.
So when you lose and you get this message that your day is going to be terrible, like, do you just go back to your room and go to sleep or what?
So there's one of two takeaways, right? First, black hits. If black hits, I'm like, boom, it's going to be an amazing day. Let's get after it.
Yeah.
If black doesn't hit, I go, all my bad luck's out of the way. Let's get after it.
This is so great. The best part is I'm going to be in Vegas with you in not too long, and I can't. I'm going to witness this, and my value investor brain is going to explode. I'm going to be like sucking my thumb in the corner, watching you burn money.
So this Wall Street Journal piece talks. I'm going to lay out a few facts because it talks about how on roulette and blackjack there are changing odds that the house is putting out there. So first, let me say this. Blackjack players last year, how much money do you think they lost in Vegas on the Strip?
10 billion.
No, 1 billion. But that is it's the second highest loss on record. The highest loss is 2007. So right before the great financial crisis.
This is like a good recession indicator.
Yeah, I mean it's something. It's something. I am gonna give my like, I don't know, takeaway from this, but Las Vegas, that's related to that. Las Vegas Strip casinos took in nearly $8.3 billion in gambling revenue last year. That exceeded the pre-pandemic revenue by more than 25%. If you put those two things together, people are gambling 25% more money and losing more money. High level. In blackjack in particular, if you hit blackjack, so blackjack is when you get an ace and another card that's worth 10. So it could be a 10 or one of the face cards, and you get that immediately. That's blackjack. The game would pay out 3-2. So if you bet $10, you hit blackjack, you get $15. Right now, blackjack tables are paying out 6-5, which means on that same $10, you get $12. They just changed the odds.
It's a massive change. I mean,
it's
really
huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge change. In roulette, what many of the tables have now done in roulette is they've added 000. So I talked about roulette, black, red, right? Mm-hmm. So the way a roulette table, if you haven't played roulette, the way that the roulette wheel is laid out is that you have a whole bunch of black numbers and you have an even number of red numbers. And then you have a green 0.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's going to be black, red, or it could be neither. There's a chance that it's neither, right? And so that gives the house an edge over just betting on colors. I mentioned 1-0. They added 0-0. So now there's 000 roulette. So they just keep changing the
So
odds that
there's
no matter
3 green squares, green,
that's
not squares, but green options.
that's what I'm reading here. And so this article is saying historically they used a wheel with 38 slots, 18 black, 18 red, and then with the 0 and 0-0 with those two, it's 2 greens. This adds one more, which lifts the house advantage. And it seems like they are increasing the number of tables like pretty aggressively that have this 0-0. Almost, it wasn't even, I can't remember what the numbers were exactly, but it was something like 40% of tables now have this. So people are spending more, they're losing more, and they don't seem to care, right? Is kind of the takeaway.
This reminds me of inflation.
Yes.
In a way, it is inflation. But here's what happens with inflation. And we go back to one of my favorite things, which is a breakfast burrito, right? You pay $5 for the thing for a decade. Yep. And then they raise it to 5.25, and then all of a sudden it's $6 and whatever. Like that, you were going to buy this breakfast burrito for 20 years, and it raises to $6.50 and then $7. And then one day you wake up, you roll out of bed, you go, and they say like $11.75, and you go, my core habits are built into this, and the little nudges, the little price increases didn't really matter. But all of a sudden, I wake up and I go, I don't want to spend $11 on this. Like, it's no longer worth it. And I think what I'm trying to articulate there is the long unintended consequences that where things move away from their true value. I think the reason people go to Vegas is because you want a decent chance of winning. You want to throw $10 down and have 15 thrown back your way.
Yep.
And there's an enjoyment that comes with that. And I don't expect this to change in the near term, but I think at some point down the road, people would go, you know what? Every time I go, I don't even like win, and then eventually lose, which is what happens in casinos, right? The more you play, you lose. It's like I go and I lose, and then I lose some more, and then I lose again, and then I go home. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can only do this too much without completely messing with the human psyche in a way where it's no longer fun.
Agreed. And this is where, when I talk about market crashes, my view on market crashes is when you look at the reason that a market crashed, whatever the tipping point was, it's usually something that happens all the time. Like it's not like some big thing occurred that was different. Like what I mean is companies go bankrupt all the time. Yep. Interest rates might hike. It happens like a decent amount. But when these things happen at a point where the market is incredibly fragile, it like can't catch itself and ends up falling a lot. Very overly simplified, but like that's kind of my view. And I think this is, to your point, it's like this is like one of those versions of that, where when you keep pushing things to the edge, consumers in this case, you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then at some point you wake up and don't want the $11 burrito. Mm-hmm. And when the economy is basically built off of $11 burritos and nobody wants them anymore, it like can happen overnight. All of a sudden everybody wakes up and you're like, oh crap, actually my $23,000 credit card balance isn't okay.
Yeah.
And then when that collective group decides that, like things can fall off a cliff, right? Like that's the way things happen. And this is it just feels so freaking greedy.
That greedy is the right word for it. I mean, so if you follow Vegas hotel rates, which I can't claim I do closely, but I've been there recently enough. Like, I mean, you're now $500 to $700 a night seems like fairly typical, which is pretty wild. And then I guess I just appreciate you bringing this up, because if I walk through any hotel casino with 000s on the roulette table, man, I'm just keep on walking. I think this is a good way to figure out who's ripping you off, because if they're ripping you off on the roulette table, they're ripping you off with the bottled water and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
The greed has to be pervasive here.
The next time I walk up and I'm like, I'm going to put it on black. Hold on. There is no black? Just
no, it's like 70% green, and then there's a few blacks and a few reds.
Exactly.
And you're not allowed to bet on green because that's the house.
Oh, it makes sense. What else you got in the bowl of fish?
All right. So your boy Lionel Messi was a free agent.
Oh, this made me so excited.
And I don't even know. I mean, I don't know how to articulate this. Here was an offer that he reportedly turned down. 3 years of playing soccer. I mean, he's already won the World Cup and everything. Like at this point in the twilight of his career, I'm going to call it, him playing soccer could be like him jogging out onto the field for 20 minutes a game. And I think people would be delighted. 3 years, 1.6 billion with a B dollars. Let's just do some rounding and say that's 500 million a year.
Yes.
That's breathtaking. I mean, the guys like LeBron makes 50, 60 million a year in terms of his pay for playing basketball. This is an entirely different world of compensation.
It's wild. And it's what Ronaldo took. Like, maybe not that exact deal, but
Yeah.
the Saudis basically paid him hundreds of millions of dollars a year. All right, so Ronaldo is playing over there.
So that was 12 months ago, right? I thought that was more 200 to 400 million.
Yeah. I mean, sorry. Yes, but multiple hundreds. Yes, you're right.
Hundreds of million per year, which is absolutely insane. But it's not 500 million per year. And then the amazing thing is he turns down that deal for more of an incentive-laden contract with Miami, Inter Miami, who's in the MLS. And that is reported to include a share of his jersey sales, kit sales, if we're really talking soccer here, a share of the Apple TV season pass revenue, and an option to buy into the club once he retires. The club is owned by David Beckham, who ran this game many years ago to come play in the U.S. and actually turned that into owning a club.
Yep.
He bought Inter Miami for 25 million, I believe, and now they think it's worth 600 million and probably worth significantly more than that after Messi plays there. Here's another stat to boggle your mind, and then I promise to be quiet. Currently, tickets for soccer in Miami are more expensive than tickets for the NBA Finals, which is currently underway in Miami. Isn't that insane?
Yes, it's quite insane. And they jumped overnight, obviously.
Yeah.
The thing that Messi, I have not read that Messi said or heard that Messi said, and maybe this isn't true, but it's what I want to believe, is that you also just don't want to go play in Saudi Arabia.
I think that's got to be because of the I'll call it the political side, but like the very checkered past with where that money comes from. Yeah.
Because even in the world where we say, owning capital is more worthwhile over the long term than income, when he's going to be making a tenth, like from a cash perspective, a tenth of what he would be making over in Saudi Arabia, that's a pretty big bet that you're betting on, like what the future team that you can buy or your Apple contract's going to be. And so, I mean, financially, it's going to be good, like golden, regardless, financially, like good to go. I think a part of this also had to be like, I really don't want to play in Saudi Arabia. I'd rather move my family over to the US. I'd rather like all of that stuff. I think that has to be.
I'm sure that's a part. But what's so crazy is when numbers get this large, it almost doesn't matter. Like,
yeah.
Practically, in terms of your day-to-day life, the difference between making even 50 million a year and 500 million a year, I don't know that it changes a single thing. Now, I'm never gonna know either because my talents are not worth that. But I see. So I'd be fascinated to talk to him about how he thinks about those dynamics, like how big the number has to be before it doesn't matter anymore, or if there's always that competitive nature of like, I want to be the best compensated athlete in the world by 2 times. Maybe that's a meaningful thing just from a competition perspective. Fascinating stuff. Another sign of a bubble, Doogles.
I like you just throw that in there. I have one more thing in the fishbowl, and I'm going to stick on sports. This is in the Philadelphia Inquirer. There's an article about Brandon Marsh, plays for the Phillies. What I found, and tell me if I'm making a leap, but I don't think I'm making too much of a leap. I found this to be interesting because, so it's baseball. I found this to be interesting because it's talking about how Brandon Marsh worked to simplify his swing that allowed him to see the ball better. And then he goes in to describe, and this brought me back to the world of investing in my mind, he's just talking about baseball. He's talking about some baseball, but he says being able to see the ball better enabled him to control the at bat versus being controlled by the at bat. And he calls it, I love this, controlled aggression. That to me is very investor aligned. He says if you're too aggressive, you try to chase out of the zone, right? So he means like the strike zone. So if you're getting too aggressive, something might be outside the strike zone, you go for it. And so what he started doing now, swinging less, choosing the right pitches. And here are some of the results that have come from that. If you're into baseball, you'll get this. If you're not, I apologize, but just stick on the controlled aggression theme. His walk rate, so the number of times he gets on base by getting too many balls, or not too many balls to the pitcher, him just the right amount of balls. His walk rate's doubled from 6.1% to 14%. So he's getting on base more just from walks because he's not swinging at those pitches that are outside the strike zone. He's dropped his swing rate from 47.6% to 40%. So a 7 absolute percentage point drop in number of swings he's taking. So he's striking out less. His strikeout rate has gone from about 34% to 30%. Chasing less pitches, controlled aggression. When he sees the right pitch, he goes for it. These are the results. I think it's a pretty cool investment analogy here in the world of sports.
Yeah, and to bring this back to compensation, if these trends continue, he might have made himself $10 million a year in terms of the difference in his performance and how valuable that is to his team being able to win. Have you ever read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis?
No, I have not.
Okay. So one of the most bizarre things you'll hear in the investing community, at least it was bizarre to me before I read it, is sometimes you talk to people about the best investing book, and this book, The Inner Game of Tennis, will be recommended to you, and you'll be like, wait, what? Huh? That's a game about tennis. And they'll be like, yeah, just go read it. It's by a tennis pro. Once you read it, you see a lot of these same themes, the controlled aggression that you like and everything else. And it's the mindset for how you attack this challenge that can be applied in many places. And investing is a great place for it. That book's really solid, and it's almost a parallel to what is being described here. I like this article. Really good stuff.
Man, thank you for the recommendation. I'll have to pick that up. We talk about this a bunch. In the end, analytics within the world of investing is table stakes. You have to put in the time in the analytics. You got to do it. But where the returns over the long term are made, it's all about psychology, decision-making, control, and discipline. And that's what separates out most people. So I'm going to read your tennis book, and we'll put this baseball article on the Substack. Controlled aggression. If you're too aggressive, you try to chase out of the zone. Stick within your zone.
Yeah, I have a story there of a decision I made this week that hopefully relates, but you can be my counselor on this, Doogles. So because I've been so fired up about Nvidia being overpriced, I have been researching. I've been researching if there's a way to take a bet against that. I mentioned this 3 episodes back. This is not something you guys or anyone should do, but there are ways to do this. And I was carefully, I had my spreadsheet going basically to figure out what bet I was taking and if it all made sense. And I was really aggressive to be conservative on the price I would pay to have to do this thing. All set up. The prices come down, ready to take the bet. I ended up pulling it off the table. And do you know why I ended up pulling it off the table?
No, why?
Because I realized that even if that there's a fat pitch coming my way, I realized 2 things. 1, there's going to be another fat pitch that will come my way soon.
Yep.
2, I wasn't going to be able to enjoy winning that. If I made lots of money there, I wasn't going to enjoy it. This would have been a 2.5-year bet against Nvidia stock effectively. And for those 2.5 years, I realized that I'd probably be anxious most of the time. And then if my money doubled or tripled, I'd probably want to pull it off the table at that point. So basically I made a conclusion that the anxiety that came with this wasn't worth doubling or tripling my money, even if I think that's what's going to happen. And the only way that this could make sense is if I don't double or triple my money. It's if my money goes up 10x, right? Or more. Yep. But even that, I don't feel like the anxiety in knowing my investing style and knowing how I like to buy the real deep value, in my eyes, the shooting fish in a barrel type investments.
Yep.
I just decided that it wasn't worth the stress, basically. Now, I don't know if that's a good decision or not. And I'm very tempted to like track, put this in my journal, my investing journal,
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is the decision I decided not to make. But even if the outcome 2.5 years from now is, oh, I would have 10x my money, I still think the roller coaster ride I would have signed myself up for is probably not worth it.
You can track this if you want from an academic perspective, but in the end, it doesn't matter. It's not a financial decision that you just made. So the financial outcome has very little to do with the decision, in my view. I don't remember why we talked about this, but there was something a few months ago where we talked about the concept of the decision you're actually making. And sometimes when you're making a decision that seems like it's just one decision, but that decision represents something. It's symbolic of a group of other decisions that you might make in the future because you made this one. And for me with Nvidia, because you were talking about Nvidia, right? And trying to figure out a way. So I was looking at Nvidia put options. And where I got to was this. It's for a different reason, but same outcome. Where I got to is I went, I feel pretty confident. That doesn't mean it's going to be right. Like it might very well be wrong, but I feel pretty confident that Nvidia is going to fall off a cliff at some point.
Yeah, me too.
They could 30x their profits this year and could be absolutely wrong and whatever, but I feel pretty confident. But a few months ago, I bought those Alibaba options, and so made that bet because at the time when I was looking at what was on the table, I was like, this feels like the right thing to do here for Alibaba. I got lucky; it turned out to be a good bet. But when I was thinking about buying the Nvidia put options, I went, am I now someone that buys options? Like that was what like went into my head. And I went, no, like I have, if if the Doogles indicator goes off, I will buy put options on the market. Like that is a thing I'll do. That's part of a system. And I feel better about that. But this, I bought Alibaba call options a few months ago. If I'm buying put options now, am I someone that buys options? And so the next time that something comes around, do I buy options? And I just went, no, like that is not what I want to be. So therefore, regardless of the financial outcome here, I don't want to buy the options. I'm doing fine otherwise. Like there isn't there's no reason for it outside of the fact that we could then talk about it. Right. And so I don't want to be a person that buys options. So that's why I didn't get into it. Same outcome.
I like your perspective there that it's not really a financial decision. And I think that's hard because you're entirely right. I made this decision not because of the dollars and cents of it, because the risk reward relationship with my emotions wasn't going to be worth it. But it is, sometimes you see, gosh, I don't know, you see the butterfly flying by and you want to go play with the thing. Like this is just a distraction thing. I'm just so fascinated with how over it skis the valuation for Nvidia is that I almost want to take a bet on it just to, I guess, have the last laugh or something. But that's idiotic. It's absolutely idiotic. I just got to look the other way. The train wreck is here, and I just got to look the other way. And I decided to look the other way this week. So I hope that's the right call.
Yeah, it sounds like it is for your own psyche. And financially, who cares? You're gonna do great.
I got one last thing. It's just an article I'd recommend. It's by Nick Maggiulli. I think I'm saying that right. On Twitter at Dollars and Data. The headline of this article says it all. If you're so rich, why are you desperate? And it generally talks through what's so common on social media, which is like, look at me. I started 3 businesses and sold them all for tens of millions of dollars. And now I'm selling my course to tell you how to do the same thing. And I think Nick's larger point here is simply, dude, really? If you got tens of $millions, like just be quiet and go have fun. Like, why do you got to sell me a course? And I like that perspective. I think that's really a solid perspective for people on all sides. Because anyone, Doogles, as you know, that starts a company and sells it for 100 million, there's a large aspect of luck involved. There's also a lot of skill and a lot of hard work. I'm not discrediting anything, but there's no template for success where you just do these 7 steps and then you go make $100 million. That's not how this works.
Yeah, I think that like point well taken, and I agree that it's solid. I think that there's value in other people being able to see what steps were taken, like looking under the hood in a specific and granular way, and not much value in like here are the 5 things to do in order to repeat what I just did. Like, which I think is different. When I say under the hood, I mean like it's we talked about with the wedding. When I got married, I have a whole spreadsheet. I got all the spreadsheets. And when other people are like, I'm going to get married, cool, I'm going to send you all my spreadsheets. No one wants to look at my spreadsheets. Like, let's be clear. No one wants to look at them. But I think there's value in it because it's what I wanted. Like when we were planning the wedding, I saw all these, like on average, this is what this costs. On average, that's what that costs. And I'm like, okay, but how exactly do you build that up? Like how much was, whatever the line item was? I want to see that kind of stuff. So I think there's value in that. But to go back, I think the greater point around, yeah, if you made $100 million, you don't need this. Like this article talks a lot about, like you don't need to do this, but it's about the game, not about the money in the end. Like the chasing is the fun part, and so therefore people can't stop chasing. And sometimes it's just like, can you just stop chasing?
Well, that's a funny analogy where Nick goes, which is like tries to understand the emotions of why they might want to do this, even if it's not about the paycheck. In some cases, it is about the paycheck. It's because the paper wealth that they are selling on social media isn't actually life-changing. So they need a job.
Yeah.
But in other cases, it might be the desire for connection and like it meaning effectively is you have to go out and sell that. It's fascinating because you're totally right. Like I love the how I built this podcast and other things that detail kind of how businesses are built and what the journey looks like. So I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing. The dichotomy here is really interesting, and it happens everywhere. So it's fun to think about. I think Nick did an artful job of breaking down this from a couple different angles here.
Agreed. Thank you for listening today, everybody. Remember, skippydoogles@gmail.com. You can fire over articles, questions, thoughts. We love it. Thank you to everybody that does. And skippydoogles.com is where you can find access to links for our Substack, skippydoogles.substack.com, or skippydoogles.supercast.com. You can find that. That's where our premium offerings are. So skippydoogles.com, go to it. You'll see all our stuff. And appreciate you all for listening.